Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Thank you for joining. I'm a bit croaky this morning. I think it's my allergies are playing up. Um, but I have a cup of tea by my side, and that will make a big difference. I'm just trying to get some of our lovely bird song on, although technically should be seagulls, I suppose. But I haven't got 2 hours of seagull music. Let's have a look. Why would you want that? Anyway, there we go. So welcome along. I'm sure more people will be catching up. If you're watching on catch up at whatever time of day or night or wherever you are in the country or world, hello, welcome for joining us. Thank you. It's lovely to have your company, even digitally from a distance of time and space. Not a lot to draw, not a lot of colours. Might be an easy. I thought I'd do an easy one this week because we are a week earlier than normal. Usually these classes, more often than not, are on the second Sunday of each month. Occasionally we have to bring them forward because of my other commitments, but also because of things that generally happen in the Banbury area around the second Sunday of each month. For example, in November it's usually Armistice, so we never have a Sunday class on Armistice. But in terms of June, the second Sunday of June is usually the big Banbury and District show, which is a bit like the Three Counties fairs and all of that kind of thing. It's a huge event in the town, just outside the town centre. And we normally organise a big art fest in a big 50-metre marquee. And that's normally next Sunday. And obviously I couldn't be teaching this class and doing that at the same time, because I'm not omnipresent. I will give you quarter past until quarter past to draw, and yeah, just enjoy the flow and the process today. Take it easy. Whenever it is you're watching, by the way, it's nice to just comment and say hello. Even if you're watching in a month or a year or whenever. Makes us all feel together. I'm going to yawn, sorry. Sunday, isn't it? Ugh, dear me. So just three colours: ultramarine, cadmium red, cadmium yellow. You could use vermilion instead of cadmium red. And any orangey yellow, any orangey red, and ultramarine's kind of on its own. We did a scene of old Harry Rocks in watercolour, actually, on one of the Monday morning demo class things for the Monday morning art group that we run. But it was a totally different view. It was from looking down. And I thought this was more an interesting view. Doesn't blow up very well. Unfortunately, it wasn't a great image, but I just love the colours and the shape and everything of it. So you'll have to go through my fumbled drawing. I did use a ruler for that straight edge. Not that, to be honest, not that it makes a huge amount of difference, because I can draw a straight line, but I've got to paint the straight line afterwards. You know, we've got to go down and up, and it'll be okay though. It's all about making watercolours watercolory today. What? That was just me. I was just checking the sound is okay. And if you could say drawn when you're drawn, that would help. But obviously, if it depends on what system you're watching on, you might not be able to add comments whilst you're watching live. So don't worry if you can't. I'm going to give you until 1:45 anyway. I have taken an antihistamine, by the way, but I do apologise if I'm sniffing. You may notice as well, there's a slight difference. It's only a minor difference, so if you're new, you won't notice it. But if you've done a few classes, whether it just be the Sunday or whichever, I've painted my board white. Normally just dirty, painty wood. And the reason why I painted it white is because I've noticed that the camera gets a little bit upset when there are strong elements of contrast. It needs the white area to balance the colour and keep the colours more true. So I've painted the board here because I'm at home obviously today. I've painted the board here and at the shop in the classroom white. So I just wipe it over with watercolours each time, or I just wallop a bit of extra white acrylic paint over the top if it gets too messy. And we've been doing it for a week now, and it does seem to work better, to give a better coloration and stops the camera from doing weird stuff that I don't know why it does it, but it just does. Sometimes it's just best to not understand or try to understand technology, isn't it, and just look at ways around it. So it should work, it should give you better colour. And I thought I was going to put some other colours in today, but I thought, you know what, we can actually do all of this, including the brownie foreground, with just those three colours. Right. I'm going to try and do it mainly with my squirrel today as well. That's how exciting things are here. Now, it will depend on where you are working from, in the kind of how hot or cold the room is. It's where I am in the dining room. I am by the window, but the grey clouds are really rolling in now. It's quite mild, but it's not baking hot. Obviously, I say this because the how I would paint this myself would be I'd paint the whole sky and sea at the same time. But obviously, that would take. I could do this painting in 10 minutes, which isn't ideal for a 2-hour class. But also, if you're in an area, in a room or a conservatory, if you're posh, or in your shed that you've renamed your studio, I don't know. I'm just stuck at a little tiny Victorian desk in my dining room window. If it's in a warm environment, by the time you've added extra bits of colour, if we're going to do both at the same time, by the time you get to do other areas like the clouds or something, which will need to be wet in wet, it could be dry and it could cause a lot of frustration and annoyance. So we're going to do sky then sea. We're going to work it in that way to hopefully less stress, because these classes, you're supposed to learn, but also you're supposed to help unwind and now ease you into your Sunday. Can't be getting you more stressed before than you were before you started. Right, so I'm just wetting my squirrel. It's important to wet your squirrel. And I really do want a decent amount of water on my sky. Now, I'm on a slope, so that means that the top of my paper needs to be a little bit wetter because everything's running downhill. Tell me about it. Thanks, gravity and age. Right. I'm going to go to the horizon line. Nice amount of wood. There's a little gap there that doesn't need to be filled in, but there we go. There we go. Bit of water water. I think I'm just having to move my head around just to check I've covered everywhere, because I've got a nice shimmer. Yes, that's fine. So we'll add the cadmium yellow. The punchier you go, the more glowy it'll look. So let's, oh, look at that. I've really gone for it, haven't I? Cad yellow. Or any orange yellow. I don't know if you follow the shop's Facebook page, but we did a Jackie tip on Wednesday, which is actually a Jackie tip, that if you spritz your watercolour pans a minute or two before you start, it gives a bit of an awakening to the colour. So I'm just going to wet my brush because I've got too much yellow in that. I've just really plonked too much in because I need to fade that up. It can't be a stripe. We need to do a graduated wash. So I'll blend it up just with water. Not all the way up, just a little. Because I also want to add a little bit of cadmium red at the horizon down here. See, that's too much. I'm really going for colour today. It's not in my psyche to do this. I don't know what's going on. I think I'm just shoving it in the colour a bit too vigorously, perhaps. I don't know. But anyway, it'll definitely glow. It'll glow now, won't it? It's on fire. Something like that. Looks tropical, not Dorset-like. And then I'm going to have a little bit of red up here. And that will hopefully blend in with the yellow. I do want to keep that yellow band there. Basically, what this will do, this addition of red will stop green. He said hopefully. And I'm sorry, I know it feels like we're having to do everything really quickly, but we are. I'm just adding a bit more water to move that about and grade it up a little bit because it looks a little bit solid on the camera. The downside of wet in wet is everything has to be done fairly quickly. I'm going to do I need to clean my ultramarine first because that's gone green. Should look after things a bit better. I want ultramarine, tiny bit of cad red, and adding the cad red to the blue just makes it less blue. So we can blend it down again in a graded wash. So we've got that lovely graded tonal sky. But I want to add clouds while it's damp. So I'm going to make quite a strong purple. A little bit more reddish perhaps to start with, so a little bit more red in my purple. And I just want to drop in some clouds. They will spread a little if your watercolours are still damp, which hopefully it is, because I'm going to do more of a bluey purple on top of this, but this is the glowy pinky bits of the cloud and will really help extra movement. If, and sadly if, your painting is starting to dry, you may need to let it dry totally before you do this, otherwise you're going to end up with lots of cauliflowers, which is not necessarily and not always a bad thing, but it can feel a little bit frustrating. So you should, the only way you can tell how responsive your paper is going to be for clouds is if you put a dot on and you can see how far it spreads. We're after that spread, really. Oh, it's a lovely spread, thank you. It's also a good way to hide any areas that may not have worked out as well, or any stripes. So if I go in with more of a blue purple, I can put these on top or above, and hopefully it will melt into the red, and then I'll stop and we can have a bit of a breather for a minute. But because the glow's down below, your bluer colour needs to be above. But still not blue, because otherwise it'll just be too blue and you'll get greens, and then, you know, there'll be tears, and then it'll make your paint run even more. We don't want that. The fun about using just 3 colours as well is that it's not as hard to mix other versions of colour because it's all related to each other. So it should be much better for you, he said, hopefully. Is that looking a bit too sausage-like? Could always add a reddy orange to the bottom of your clouds if you really wanted to. I'll show you how you can do that. We can, oh, that might be a bit too reddy orange. Let's just see. Yeah, it is. Basically, if it really hasn't worked, and you know, even artists that have been painting a long time, it doesn't always, gauging the amount of water or paint is a tricky job, and we don't always get it right at all. See, it just lightens it a little bit, but I am in risk of getting cauliflower, so I'm going to stop. And a cauliflower happens when part of your painting is dry and the other part is wet. So I'm going to leave it. I'm just going to let it dry for a sec. If you're not sure what I mean by cauliflower, as this is drying, hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit easier. Can you see that I've got, where I added that lighter colour, I've got a really dark outline around the edge, which, you know, in certain aspects is fine, but it does look a little like a hedgehog or a caterpillar at the moment that maybe I need to think about tweaking. But so a cauliflower happens when you've got a damp or drying area of paint and you go in with another wet area of paint. So normally when you've got wet paint and wet paper or wet painty paper, they blend. When you've got a cauliflower happening, what happens is that's dry, so instead of all being receptive, maybe only part of it is receptive. So the wet paint comes in and it can't get to blend with all of its friends apart from one area here and maybe an area there. So you get more of a staggered cauliflower top. I've got my 11 o'clock bongs now, excuse me, because I'm not at the shop, I'm at home. So this just needs to dry for a little while. I can show you, if you want to get rid of cauliflowers, how you can, but to be honest, I'm happier with these cauliflowers, but this paper is too wet for me to do that with. I might have to go plug the hairdryer in or something in a second, but we'll just see how it goes. It's only 11 o'clock. We've only been at this half an hour. So if it's all gone wrong, because obviously I can't see your work, if it's all gone wrong, just dry it totally, then re-wet areas and drop colour in, and it gives a bit more depth. I might do that with this just to give you an idea, because it is all about the sky. I'm going to go plug the hairdryer in so I can show you what you can do. I can't, it doesn't always go right, and it hasn't gone perfectly well for me in places, which is fine, because I can show you how to correct it then. Right, just going to get the hairdryer on it for a minute, and you should see the paper shrink back a little bit. Right, so an important thing I can talk to you about briefly as well, because it's all about the learning as well, isn't it? Not just about this scene. If you notice, look, my paper is flat. It was really cockled before because of the amount of moisture in. Now, two things. Obviously, I've just hair dried the moisture out. But if you've ever noticed, when I paint in watercolours, I do not tape it on all four sides, ever. I either use pins or staples in the corners and the middle, long parts. So I just use 6 staples or 6 pins. Obviously mapping pins are more cost effective because they do last a lot longer, but they do make slightly larger holes in your work. What happens, you see, is by having the pins rather than tape, the paper can shrink and contract around the pin, and generally it keeps it flat. So this is a painting that I did on Thursday afternoon. It's flat. I haven't done anything to flatten it. It's just hasn't spread and contorted. Because what happens if you tape it, you're going to get massive cauliflower, massive doming effects around the tape because the paper can't shrink and contract properly. You're stopping it from doing that. If you say, oh, but I like the white edge, Barry. I don't know why you talk like that. You might say, oh, I like the white edge, Barry. However you say it, you can have the white edge. But what I would say is put your masking tape on your paper, wrap it round the edge, then pin it or staple it. And then it will shrink and contract in the same way as mine do. Honestly, it's the best way. I never pre-stretch watercolor paper because it's a waste of time. So I never ever stretch watercolor paper ever, because you don't need to with modern paper anymore. The world's a different place as it was 20 years ago. You don't need to stretch it, despite what people say, because I never do, and it works well for me. But because I don't stretch it, the paper does stretch and expand a little bit more. So I just use staples or pins. It really is a good way. So 2 things. If you want to get rid of... I'm trying to find my number 4 round brush. There it is. If you want to get rid of cauliflowers, you just want a clean, damp brush. And you soften the edge of the dark bit. I kind of like it, so I'm not going to do it too much. But basically you soften the edges so it's less harsh. But if you've gone, oh, I wanted more texture, I wanted more whatever in my sky, also fine. But what you do is you wet an area twice the size of the area you want to fix. So if I wanted to put some clouds here and some clouds here, I'm going to really wet my paper very quickly. If you faff about too much, you'll lift off the colour. So this is if you want to give yourself more depth or correct a potential problem in your clouds. So because I've got this wet here, you see, look, I've still got wet in wet clouds that I can add layers to. Because the paint will only spread, you see, where you've wet the water. Wet the water, added the water. So it adds an extra dimension. You might want 2 or 3 areas. You don't have to do them all at the same time. Or if you've got another big brush spare, have a spare brush for shoving your water on. And then you can add more cloud shapes on top. So let's say this cloud here you wanted to change. I'm just going to wet quickly wet, and I might want something a bit darker around the top, or to hide a bit of that cauliflowering, or maybe I just want a bit more something on it, like that. Adds a bit more depth. It doesn't ruin your painting. The only time it will is if you wet an area with a hard line, because what will happen, let me just wet some of that, let's add a bit more colour in there. What will happen if you just wet your brush and wet your paper, but don't be random or loose or free, what will happen is your paint will run to that line. So always go bigger. Always go bigger when you're re-wetting. I mean, if you've got a massive brush, sometimes it pays to get a big hake. Maybe this is a bit too big, but you can get them in half and quarter size. This is one of the bigger ones. And it's made of goat hair, and it's really absorbent. I could wet the whole of this white board with one of these dipped and soaked in. It's really big, so maybe not that size. I think I've got to order some more in, actually. But oh, it's 11:11. Make a wish. And you could wet your whole sky and do more to your sky if you want to. So I hope that helps give you that idea that all is not lost in watercolour. You can correct and you can add more. And you can see my paper isn't cockling much, but I am going to get the hairdryer on it, just in case. Right, let it dry. Yeah, I think I'm quite pleased. Do you know, I've just noticed though, I have got a hard edge there that I want it softened, so I'm just going to use a smaller brush, agitate the paint a little, maybe add a bit of red, and drag it down behind the rock. You don't always see things in watercolours until they dry. It's a bit like, you know, if you're sending a text message, you do all of your editing after you've pressed send, don't you? I do, anyway. Oh, and you might think, well, why wet an area to put a cloud in? You don't have to. But wetting gives you natural fuzzy edges. Whereas if you don't wet it, you won't get a natural fuzzy edge. It will just, you will have to make that cloud shape yourself. So I'm going to let that dry, then we can work on the lower part. I'm going to just top my cup of tea up because I made a big pot of tea just before we started. But I'll be back in about 1 minute or 2 minutes. Just give you a chance to, I need you to chill and calm, it's fine. So we can get through the rest of it. But I'm happy with this guy, and now I've darkened that area and shown you how. Hopefully you'll see that watercolour paintings are not lost. I grew up with being told, oh, you can't change a watercolour painting, you can't add to it, once you've done it you're stuck. And to a minor degree that's possibly true, but there are options and ways around it, as long as you've got a big brush and a willing spirit. I'm a loose leaf tea drinker, you see, so I do like my pot. Right, you'll be pleased to know that the reflections don't actually match anything to do with this. As long as the colour's in the right sequence, we're all right. So that's a relief, isn't it? Right, so give my squirrel a good wet. And to be honest, it doesn't matter even if you go over this bit, because that bit's a bit darker. So it will cover. Watercolours are sneaky because you think you've wet an area and it turns out that you haven't at all. Right, trying to do this again. So we'll put the yellow at the horizon, let it drip and run down. It's more of a triangle, isn't it? So it drops a bit lower that way. Then, oh, I'll use some of this orange to save me some time. Bit of red. Let it run and dribble on purpose. That's what we're after. Bit of red. I try to make my reflections paler than the colour that they are reflecting. And to be honest, it's not the law. Sometimes I'll do them darker than the colours that they're reflecting. But I do like to have the differentiation. I like to have either the sky or the reflection lighter. And to me, it just feels a bit drippy and dippy and light. Drippy and dippy and light, oh, it's drippy. I hope my painting will be all right. Right, let's go with a bit more purple, because I am going to put the clouds in, but I really do want it to run more than the other stuff. So I'm going to go with a slightly wetter brush as well, let it run. Because there are things we can do that will make it feel a bit better, to be honest, and make it feel a bit more watery, because we haven't got waves and that kind of stuff for the sea. So we can create interesting stuff. And it can be done while wet or dry. There's not really a right or wrong with this method. So I'm just cleaning my brush. And I'm just sort of going left to right over my reflection. It's still wet. It's still absolutely soaking wet. That was a mixture of soaking and sopping. Socking. Maybe it'll catch on. It won't. So can you see how that feels more watery? Because I've put a few lines and staggered it a little. You could even lift out parts of it, but I don't think there's any need to. But if you were, just a clean damp brush helps agitate and create a little bit more light. You may be agitated enough, I don't know. Let that dry. You could add darker bits in if you wanted to. If you're going to add darker bits, oh look at that! I just dropped my brush across my sky. Can you see that? It's all going wrong this morning. If I'm quick, I can lift it out so you can see that even throwing my brush, I don't quite know what happened then. It just jumped out of my hand. Thankfully it was the same colour. There we go, it's gone. Oh, scary. Right, let it dry. If you do want to make yourself a drink, obviously you can make yourself a drink at any point. You don't have to wait for me to go, because you're at home. You can do it at any time. Don't need permission. I'm just going to let this dry naturally, so this would be a good point if you wanted to. We're at an hour in the lesson, so that's good. Right. Let's let that dry for a minute. How's it coming on? Is it looking all right? Hopefully it's looking better than mine. Although, did you see the post I did on the shop page yesterday afternoon, evening, about the Tiger watercolour class that that the three of our classes have done? Basically, if you're new to all of these classes, Thursday afternoon watercolour, the subject is repeated on a Monday evening watercolour, and then it's repeated about 12 weeks later on a Friday afternoon. And the reason why I did that is because our classroom is extremely tiny. At best, in happy pre-pandemic times, we could only fit 8, 9 in at an urgent push, but it really is tight. I mean, it's only a 12-foot square room. So fitting 7 or 8 people in is a tight squeeze. There's not much elbow room. And because we didn't have anything online, no online offerings, and we couldn't get everybody in on the Thursday afternoon class, that's when we set up the Friday afternoon class, which was 12 weeks later than the Thursday one. So we just repeated the same images. And then we were getting more people in who couldn't make the day because they were at work. So then I ran the Monday evening one. Obviously now with these online recordings, you can join whenever you like. So it has meant that I can reduce my teaching hours instead of Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesday, Thursday evenings, Mondays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, Friday days, and monthly weekends. It means I can do a normal hour teaching, and I'm not basically stuck to my classroom for about 72 hours a week, which I was pre-pandemic. So it has alleviated me substantially being able to do these online classes. But I randomly selected about 25 paintings of the tiger head that we just finished on the Friday class. There's 3 classes worth, so 25 images of the tiger, and they all look so amazing together. They really do. So do check that out. And yesterday morning I did a free class on how to lighten and darken watercolours. It was about 45 minutes to an hour long. It is available on our website or our YouTube channel as well, in our free learning zone on our website. Nearly dry. Let me get the hairdryer on this. So yeah, I mean, on our Facebook page we've got lots of demos and lessons and random bits of videos to wade through, because basically every time we post a video, even if it's 20-second advert for something on the shop floor, some of the products we sell, it all gets compiled into the videos section or media section on Facebook. So I've selected some lessons and demos and put them on our YouTube channel, and then the best of those I've then transferred to our free learning zone on our website. So if you're stuck for images or lessons and perhaps you can't afford to do as many classes as you would like, there are plenty of free demos and full-length classes. Actually, the full-length classes we did over lockdown are still available on Facebook, on YouTube, and on our website. We've got another free class coming up next month, actually, the end of July. And it's watercolour, so it's a Saturday morning. And what is it? Bong, 1:30. It's a child in wellies on the beach in watercolour. So that will be the next free class. I think it's the end of June, 26th of June, something like that. No, July. Sorry, 26th of July. Just going to quickly have a look because I'm on the new booklet now for next month. 24th of July. Child on a beach in wellies in Watergate, 11 till 12:30 on the shop Facebook page. Free, full length class. And next month we're doing beach, cliffs and figures on the 11th of July, which is the next Sunday class. Right, so that's drying. And we're exactly an hour in, which is really, really great. We're going good guns. Now the actual rocks, the cliff faces, if you like, are not white. They just look white because they're paler than the rest. However, if I look on my printout, they look actual dark purple, but on the digital image they're not as dark as that. So we'll do a couple of coats on that. I'll probably use my number 4 round. I know I said I'd try and squirrel it out, but I won't. I'll use my number 4 round because I need a little bit of spot, especially after throwing my brush across my sky. You can see that's dried now. So nobody's gonna know. Now, have I got a bigger reference? There we are. Where I can just look at, if you look at the colours on here, they are quite blue, but there is a bit of a pinky tone to the lighter areas of the cliff. And what's great about that is it means that we can create texture on our cliff face much easier. So that's good. So hopefully this is dry enough for you to lean on. Well, I'll wait another minute in case. Ah, we've got rain. The big old clouds have started to cry. Well, summer was good while it lasted, those 3 days, wasn't it lovely? Right, let's get with the number 4 round. And I've got this purpley pink that is going to be useful. I'm going to dilute it quite a lot. And dry brush it in a downward motion. So we're still going to be naughty and keep a bit of white on our cliffs. So dry brushing, if you've never done it before, is a lie. The terminology in painting isn't really great, if I'm honest. and a lot of it is counterintuitive. A dry brush just means a slightly damp brush. If your brush is totally dry, then sadly you won't be able to get the technique. So your painting your paint needs to be dampy wet, but your brush needs to be on the verge of dry. So I just clean it and then dab a bit of the excess water off on kitchen rollers or a bit of a towel, and then you use the side of your brush and drag in whichever direction you want. So if you're doing water, you'd drag across. Texture on a tree, you'd follow the grain of the tree. And here we're following the gradient of the cliff face, so we want it downwards. Now you can see it's hitting and missing, which is what dry brush is. It hits the peaks and the troughs of the paper. And we don't use the brush upright, because even nylon bristles, because most brushes are made of nylon now, plasticky nylon, the decent brushes are made to mimic hair, so they are hollow with scales. Each nylon strand is hollow with scales on. And if you're tipping the brush that way, the hollow scales and the hollow strands and scales are just throwing the water out. But we don't want that. We need the side of the bristles, which is why a flat brush wouldn't work either, because if you're using a flat brush, you'd still have to use that on its side. Sometimes it's good to have a little bit of watercolour paper or a bit masked off, so you can you can practice, or use a bigger sheet of paper and then draw your image size on the side or the middle, so you've got a large area to play about with colour or technique and see how it looks. So we've got a bit of a glow starting to form. Well, it's a shame I'm not at the shop today, because if you've been following the shop for a long time, we've always had issues with leaky roof, and we've had pots and buckets in the shop as a permanent fixture for about the last 7 years. But we decided to use our government grant and pay half with the landlord to get the roof fully fixed, because it's not really their responsibility either, because it was put on after. It's a long story, but anyway, so we got the main shop roof redone, totally reboarded and refelted, re-rubberized. It's not totally flat, it's a slight slope, so it's not a flat roof, because the leaks were getting so bad. We had a storm a couple of months ago, and the leaks were so bad that I lost quite a bit of stock. Well, unfortunately, there's another tiny bit of a roof, because it's an old Victorian building, that attaches on to the main shop roof, which we didn't get done. And when they did the main shop roof 2-3 weeks ago, it actually agitated the older roof that was attached and caused me to lose more stock and a whole wall of water. So they've now come and replaced that. So in theory, my shop should be absolutely watertight, but the only way you can find out is when it rains. But the roofer is a good roofer, and is highly recommended and knows his stuff, so I've had to put my faith in him totally. Right, let's use some of our bluey purple colour that we used for the sky, and I'm going to really dilute this, really dilute it, and we want it, see, that's a nice colour, but I don't know if it's too, my brush is a bit wet, I think. The reason you can tell if your brush is a bit wet is it it fills in big sections that you may not want. Because the light's coming from this angle, you see, the left-hand side of each cliff. There must be a name for these broken things. I can't think what that could be. It's Sunday morning. Well, it's nearly Sunday afternoon. I certainly can't think. But this time, you see, we're just a bit more sparing. With what's being applied. And you can do it more in sections so it feels like rock. So you've got more angles to think about and consider. And you can go a little bit darker. But don't go as dark as your sky. I think that's the benchmark. You want to keep your sky as a sky and not let this take over too much. Because you want it to feel lighter, don't you? That's the snag. Getting it light enough, but also three-dimensional enough. Might need to add a little bit more blue to that mixture. And then you can start using the point of your brush to put in a few extra lines and details that starts to help it look more rocky. Rock-like, I suppose, not Sylvester Stallone. Running out of colour. We're going to be using a lot of purple, so... See, that's sort of a... The bottom of the rock is slightly different, because it's going to be a manky, greeny cream colour. Oh, I've got a squeaky desk now. Well, that's looking a bit alright. I'm still a bit, you know, I don't know if I need to go a bit darker with this. I'm looking at it, and I don't know if it's too pale. Don't forget your tea. I think I might need a bit more glow. Might use some of this yellowy orange glow, I don't know. Do you know, I think I'll leave well alone and let it dry, because it will dry 30% lighter. And then we can do the mossy top and the mossy bottom. Isn't that where Shaun the Sheep lives, in Mossy Bottom? Anyway, we'll let it dry. I'm always a bit apprehensive. Oh, Janet, I'm glad it's okay. That's what we're happy. That's what we're happy about. I've just seen that comment. Sorry. Sometimes they're a bit slow coming up because there's a. It's funny. There's a delay. So I'm coming to you from the future. Because when you've just heard me say that, I said that at least a minute ago. So then you reply, and then it's a minute. So it takes at least 2 minutes, 3 minutes for when you hear me ask a question, then you reply, then I come back and read your reply. Hilarious. So if you, let's say you live next door to me and you worked where there weren't any windows, and I say, oh, it's raining, it won't have started raining in your world until a minute after. Spooky. I don't want this to look like an elephant. I'm a bit concerned it might start. We definitely did the grassy stuff on there in a second, won't we? Yes. We'll be alright for a bit. I'm debating whether to bake a cake this afternoon. Decisions. I don't know what to eat either today. Sundays is my sort of faff around the house, do a bit of housework, maybe some baking, maybe commissions. But I'm ahead now. I've done all my commissions that I need to do, and I've got a few ideas for some actual paintings of my own that I want to do, which is rare. And so I might do some of that. But I'm also doing an art therapy course for people in education, that kind of thing, and I'm almost halfway through. It's a 10-module course in your own time online, kind of thing, and it's quite fascinating actually, because it links a lot of things in. It was talking about sound therapy, and it's talking about colour therapy at the moment as well, and a lot of it isn't fully studied or understood. So it's not totally backed scientifically, although art therapy is more scientific, which is why you always find it so relaxing and therapeutic when you do a class. Right, I'm going to go with a bit of cadmium yellow. I'm going to pivot my tile. Actually, no, I'll use the top of this tile there. Cadmium yellow and ultramarine. Now, cadmium yellow is an orange yellow and ultramarine is a purple blue. And because of that, there is very little green in the mixture. So that means we'll get darker, duller greens. And if you wanted to make it slightly darker still, you can add a tiny bit of red. Too much red though, and it will go brown. But hang on to that thought, because that will be useful. Maybe something like that. And if I go with it, make it a little bit more yellowy. I think we can do the bottom of the rocks. With a slightly darker top, which is the tide line. And I'm doing it fairly dry brush. You could always add a bit of purple if you want to, because the beach in front of it and to the side of it is kind of purpley. So if you added, I've had to mix a bit more blue and red to it. Always a flat bottom when you're dealing with water. You can use some of this texture in the rocks as well. This greeny grey colour. I'm trying to resist the urge to outline too much, but I do think it needs it, especially mine. Can't speak for yours, but mine definitely needs a bit of an outline. Like so. It's looking a bit more solid now, isn't it? A little bit more solid. We've got to make it reflect in the water. Do you know, I'm looking and I think I need to darken the left hand side a little bit more. Let me make up some more purple. It's nice just using three colours. I know you have to work that little bit harder, but it really does, you know, in terms of when I say, oh, you need a bit of blue, you don't have to go, well, which blue was that? I'd love to find, and I don't know how I do it, I'd love a company to make my paint and make my green mixes for me. That would be amazing, to save you all having to, you know, I only use 3 greens. Four greens. A light, 2 mid, and 1 dark. And if I could get those made, that would be just wonderful, wouldn't it? Sadly, I don't have enough knowledge of paint making, nor the time or the space to do it myself. But I don't think a big company would be interested, because I'm not a known name. And I'm not going to be ordering 1 billion of them. That looks better. I'm happier with that now. Looking a bit better. Right, now I need to do a little bit of reflection. It's time for a bit of reflection, everybody. I'm going with a pinky purple. And I'm just dragging down with a damp brush. And then finishing it off left to right. You could use your squirrel for this. If you can keep everything quite damp and fluid, it makes a big difference in reflection. Lines, linear strokes at every opportunity. It just keeps it. You could always use a bit of gel pen afterwards, a white gel pen, and that'll make a big difference, but we'll let that dry for a sec. Gosh, it's 12 o'clock already. Well. I'm just going to rub out that horizon line that my pencil's still... Ooh, move my whole move my whole painting. It is actually, the photograph, it is more of a purple, so maybe I need to use some of my purple. Too much red. I'm using a thin brush as well. I should have just used the big brush. It'd be easier. That'll do. Some sort of thing there. I don't know what that is, but let's put that in. Right. It's going to feel weird because we've still got this area which is sort of an orangey rocky colour. Orangey brown. And at the moment it's white paper for me. So that's changing how the whole image looks. If I just put a bit of this grey trace down paper just here to cover up a patch of white, can you see how it changes the whole look of the picture? So we want to make brown on purpose. So we're going to make a reddy purple, a reddish purple. So ultramarine with quite a bit of cadmium red. That's too much cadmium red, but just add a bit more blue. So when you're mixing three colours together, you always mix one secondary colour first, because generally when you're mixing three colours, it's three primary colours. So you mix, whether it be green or orange or purple, you mix that first. So that's our reddish purple. Then you introduce your third colour slowly and incrementally. So our third colour is cadmium yellow. Here it is. So if I start adding that into the purple, I will have a nice yellow brown. Now if my blue is too strong, that yellow brown will be purple, will be green. So if it goes a bit green, then add a bit more blue. Add a bit more red, sorry. There's too much blue if it's already green based. And I'm going to use this to add a bit of texture so far. But we've got nice strong purple shadow to put in here. Do you know what? I think I will just paint it flat bottom. Flat bottom is always essential when dealing with water. because otherwise it won't look like the water's flat or straight. And water always runs horizontally unless it's a waterfall, and then it's vertical. It is an important thing that you'll discover, and I've said this many, many times, that over the years I've seen paintings that have not obeyed that rule, and it's spoiled it. I mean, actually spoiled it. Oh gosh, 20 years or so ago, in a previous life, in a previous town far, far away, I used to help manage a gallery that was attached to the shop that I worked in. And we had the most amazing oil paintings on display of local canal scenes. Honestly, they were photographic, absolutely stunning. However, I hung them and appreciated them, and I had to walk past them every time I went to the staff room. And I really thought nothing of it until I started looking, and I found, I'm just switching to my bigger brush so I can cover a bigger area and just fill that in. I found that I was leaning, and I was leaning the same way, the same direction for all of the paintings. And I checked, and they were actually hung straight. But the water wasn't painted horizontally, it was painted with a slight slope. You know, like your handwriting occasionally slopes. And it spoiled it for me. Couldn't look at them in the same way. Right, that'll do. Let that dry. Probably won't be using my squirrel now, because it's going to be dry brush purple colours for the next bit. So we'll let that dry. Wow. Still not dry. Oh gosh, it's really squeaky. Do you know what? That's better. Slightly better. I just leant back and my chair was right up against the dining table. Not good. So we need to make sure that the base of these cliffs are darker when we mix. We're going to make a really dark purpley brown. Basically, we're going to make a really deep purple within that. And that will give us some depth here. Because if our light, let's say our light is coming from here. It's low because it's sunset or sunrise, but it's down. So only the tops and right side of all of the rocky bits are going to be on show and in light. Everything else is going to be in shadow. I need to finish my tea, but that's okay because it's coming up to 12:15. We're doing well. You've all done very well. So let's mix this dark purple. A lot of ultramarine. And cadmium red. This time you want it more to the blue side. It's already got some yellow in because of the browny colour that we've got there. Right, so I can really start thinking about light and dark. But you see here it's much darker along the base of all of these rocks, and you can literally draw rock shapes if you wished, because this rock here is therefore in front of those, so we can come in maybe do a bit of dry brush to get extra texture. Same for where we've got every bit of peninsula. Outline, and this is the same technique for doing layers of trees, to be honest. You do your sort of outline, whether it be a rock or foliage, and then you want to go up into the previous or the back area. So it stops looking outlined. It'll help if you try not to think about it too much. Let your brush just wobble and wiggle by itself. Otherwise you're kind of at risk of overly worrying. And it will sort of give you too much detail that isn't really important to the whole scene. might end up a little bit annoyed. Which we don't want to happen. So if you want a rock shape there, again you'd either outline the rock and a bit of dry brush texture, but you always want the outline to be brushed up and away, and that really does make a massive difference in the layers. Can you see we've got layers? I do love layers. Maybe a bit more red in this now, just to change it up a little. A bit of a plateau there. Brush up and back in a dry brush fashion. I've actually got my first booking for a gig. It's been a long time since that happened. Been over a year. You know, when my income has substantially dropped because I'm not gigging or performing. A poor wedding. This isn't for this gig though. There's a wedding that I've been booked for 3 times, and we've postponed it. So hopefully that's in August. But this gig is for an old folks home, and I've got to sing in a gazebo, which is fine. At the end of the month, which is lovely. It's going to be weird because I've done one outdoor gig this year, which was in Parsons Street outside the shop, because I suffer with anxiety terribly, no matter what. Even though it's a weird thing, you know, when you do what I do in terms of classes and performing and lectures and all of this. I have crippling anxiety, but yet I am also compelled to do what I do. I can't not, which is a really weird battle. So I have to push myself and force myself to do these things, otherwise I never will actually do them. So I performed in the street outside the shop a couple of weeks ago, just as a warm-up really, just to get used to performing in front of real life people, which is a bit scary. After a year off, I mean, I used to get petrified before, but now it's sort of, I'm starting again. I'm just doing a slightly runnier version of this, so it's a bit like Reflection. But I've only had my one jab, so when the care home phoned me yesterday to book me, I was all prepared to go, but I've only had one jab. I don't think I'm safe enough to go in. I don't want to, you know. But I'm in a garden in a gazebo, so that's cool. As long as everybody's safe, that's the main thing. Right, I'm going to let that dry and see how it's going to look. I'm quite pleased, to be quite honest. Quite pleased. We'll probably do some purpley grey streaks in the water and maybe some white gel pen highlights on some of these rocks, but I can't really do that until it's totally dry, because I've ruined several gel pens by going in both watercolour and acrylic, where I've gone in too eagerly and clogged up the end and made the ink swell and solidify in the barrel, so I can't get it out. My own fault, what can you do? Right, let's let that dry for a sec. Right, how are we doing? We're doing a high time. Okay. I'm just going to pull out a bit. So basically, I did this in the demo yesterday. I was talking about how I make my colour. I pull out some of the dark to dilute it, because then at least I've got light and dark areas. Otherwise, it can be a little bit problematic in that you end up lightening all of your dark bits, and then you need to mix more dark bits afterwards. So this is to go around some of the stones and just flick into the sea area in short or long strokes. Horizontally again, has to be horizontal. Otherwise, unless it's curved, if it's curved then you're alright. But even then it has to be curved in a certain way. It is frustrating with water. But if you've ever done a scene with water and got annoyed because it doesn't look right, generally, probably because your lines aren't horizontal. In a similar way, if you've ever got annoyed at yourself if you've painted or drawn a building, often 9 times out of 10 it's because your verticals are not vertical and they're leaning slightly. Let me add a bit of blue in this, slightly darker lines. See, most of water it's all about shapes and patterns. If you can get that, it will automatically look better. Now obviously in real life I don't do paintings in 2 hours. Sometimes they can be 12, 16, 14 hours. So, you know, I don't even do things in 2. But I like to teach in 2 because it any longer and you can get bored. We've got the full day masterclasses that we do, which are 5 hours long. But I know some people struggle for that length of time because it is a long time to sit and concentrate. And you know, we've all got lives. I haven't, but most of you lot have, which is lovely. You know, 6 hours or 5 hours is a long time to do one thing. So what I want to do is add a few highlights, which you can do in gouache or gel pen. I'm probably going to have to do it in gouache, white gouache, because Oh, we have got white gouache on our online shop, by the way. It is expensive. We have got a cheap, we have got more affordable options, more student quality options in the shop. They're not as opaque, but they are a lot more affordable. But white gouache does go a very long way. I think it's about £6 for 14 ml. So you have to be sparing with it. However, when it is dry, you can still use it. I've got a bit I've squeezed out onto my tile here weeks ago, and it's gone solid. So I just re-wet it and massage the water in a little. And what's good about watercolour, gouache, gel pen, all of those, is that I can actually, if I mix a bit of yellow in with this, I'll get a sort of Naples yellow light, and I can just go over the top with gouache. You see, a long time ago, I never really used gouache with watercolour. I sort of favoured just leaving it out if you can, but it's not always practical or possible in a lesson. So I've changed a lot of how I work, and because I now use gouache as the majority of the way I paint personally, I've always got lots to hand, so it does make a big difference. Except gouache is slightly different to watercolour in that it dries slightly more matte and slightly darker. A bit like emulsion. But you could do this with white acrylic. Art is all about what's best for you. It is your journey. And that's why I spend a long time trying to look at different ways that I can show you how to do things. So if you've even done a similar class to me of this sort of scene, I might do it in a slightly different way. So you can go, oh, do you know what? I think I prefer that way. That's much nicer than that way that works. Because my interest is, I don't want you all to be me. Because then I'd be out of a job. Because quite frankly, some of you are better. I've taught you too well. And I don't want the competition this late in my career. But if I can teach you all a bank of skills, basically what will work for you isn't necessarily what will work for somebody else. So you'll have this skill set that works only for you. And certain colours you'll find work better for you. Certain brands of colours will work better than you. You know, you might hate artist watercolour and prefer to do the student quality. And that's fine too. I know lots of artists, professional artists, that don't use artists watercolour and really love student quality. It's you know, it's all an exploration, and I think you've got to enjoy it. And by enjoying it, you'll end up doing more of it, and it won't feel like a chore, or you won't get scared or apprehensive about doing stuff, because you'll know it all works for you. It takes time. I posted a video, I think this morning, about that on the shop page, that, and I was using an example of drops of pink water, or drops of pink dye in a jar of clear water. And basically, each time you learn something or do a painting, that's a drop of pink dye in a clear jar of water. And so, you know, it might take a while, but slowly and surely the pink drops all build up. And they add colour to your life. And you're learning. Each drop is learning. Even on a bad day, you'll have some pink drops coming in there. However, you get to a point where you look at your jar and it's just pink. And you think, you know what, I'm not getting anywhere. It's just pink. And that's the point where a lot of people give up. Because they didn't look and remember that their jar was clear when they started. So clearly they've come a long way. A very long way. And they just need to maybe try a new technique or try something different. Or dig out their original pieces of artwork just to see how far they've come. And they'd be surprised. They'd be very surprised. I don't think I can do any more to this. I've added some gouache highlights now. I've really enjoyed that. And it's past as well. So I'll just remind you again what next month is. It's the 11th of July. And it's Beach, Cliffs and Figures. It's a different scene to this. But it does follow on quite nicely. And that's the 11th of July at 10:30. What's coming up this week, you may ask? Well, I will tell you. Tomorrow morning is a lighthouse in Dundee in acrylics. Now remember, that's our art group, which is a 45-minute demonstration. I've kept it the same because we normally meet in the village hall pre-pandemic. And I do a 45-minute demonstration, then they'd have 2 hours to chat and work from the demo, or do their own thing based on the techniques, or just do their own thing with me around. So it's a 45-minute demo-ish of a lighthouse in Dundee in acrylics Monday morning. Monday evening is doing Seven Sisters, which is this. Tuesday evening is acrylics of an old door. Wednesday afternoon's drawing class is a Howling Wolf and Moon. So that's pencil. Thursday morning is Rocky Mountains in watercolour. Maybe I'll be using a credit card for the watercolour technique. I don't know, I haven't decided yet. Thursday afternoon is a secret garden. So that's going to be lots of wet in wet colours and lots of foliage. Friday afternoon is a view of Jacob's Ladder in the Peak District with a lovely old Packhorse Bridge. Saturday is calligraphy day, and that's borders, banners and scrolls, how to lay out the words in interesting ways, combining several different types of writing styles as well. So lots of exciting things to look forward to over the next week. So whatever you're doing, whatever you're up to, hopefully it'll be dry enough for you to enjoy it. And as ever, I will, let me take my pins out so you can see it slightly better. I will take a photograph of this and post it underneath the reference image that I shared this morning. So whenever you get around to doing this lesson, I really do look at the pieces that you've created, and I love what you do. And thank you for sharing it with me, and thank you for sharing your time with me today. So thanks so much. Take care. Have a great day ahead, and I'll see you all very, very soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.